all know that I am Heather Belzer, and I'll be the moderator for today's panel discussion. Before we get started, there are a couple of housekeeping matters to take care of. First, please make sure you mute yourself during the discussion so that we don't have background noise. Although for anyone in the audience, it's fine for you to be unmuted for applause during the panelist introductions if you like. Second, I'd like to let you all know that this panel discussion is being recorded, as we have several folks who are interested in attending that couldn't be here this morning. Even though the focus will be on our panelists, if you're not comfortable being recorded, please turn off your camera. With that taken care of, let's get started. Today we have an amazing panel on club mentoring programs, where we'll be talking about best practices for your mentoring program, providing tips for success, and answering some questions. But before we dive into panel introductions, I'd like to take the temperature of the room. Let's have a show of hands. How many of you are in a club with a mentoring program? How many of you have been mentored in a club mentoring program? How many of you have been a mentor in a club with a mentoring program? How many of you have been struggling to retain members in your clubs? How many of you want to have more engaged members in your clubs? That's awesome, thank you. Our goal today is that whatever your role is in your club, you'll walk away with something, a new idea, a fresh perspective, or a new strategy that you can apply to have a more successful club program or mentoring program in your club. And that will help you retain members and increase member satisfaction and engagement. So here's the format to give you an idea of what to expect. We're going to take a few minutes to meet with each of the panelists and learn a little bit about their background in Toastmasters. Each panelist will then tell us what they think is the most critical part of a club mentoring program. Then I'll kick off the conversation, asking questions to draw out some of the important issues we should be talking about. And finally, for the last half of our time, we'll open up the floor to give you a chance to ask your questions to improve your club mentoring program. You can send your questions to me in the chat box, which I'll then read to the panelists. And when you submit your question in the chat box, please indicate if the question is for one panelist in particular or for any or all panelists to answer. Sound good? Great. Let's get started with panel introductions. After sitting next to a Toastmaster for more than a year in educational classes, being amazed at how easy he made presenting look, our first panelist had to find out more about Toastmasters. She'd been nervous to present in front of her peers, so she decided to give Toastmasters a try. She's thankful to those that mentored her and also to those that she's had the opportunity to mentor. She's excited to continue service to the district in her new position. Please help me welcome District 115 Program Quality Director-elect, Distinguished Toastmaster Carol Campbell.
Thank you, Heather. In talking about my background in Toastmasters, I joined Toastmasters in 2007, which makes that about 12 and a half years ago. I was in a small club and I had the privilege of having several fantastic mentors as soon as I got into my club. I had Mike Wilson, Kay Collis, Diana Volker, and Bob Dobson. Because my husband and I were the only two new members in the club, we had a wealth of mentors available to help us. It was absolutely fantastic to be able to ask questions, to be able to be in a safe environment and allow ourselves to grow. Now, fast forward a little bit. Now that I know maybe a little bit, I get the opportunity to mentor. One thing that I found important as I mentored was checking schedules. You cannot hook a mentor and a protege together if their schedules don't mix. If they cannot connect, if they cannot find that time to where they can sit down and discuss their goals, it makes it very, very difficult. Another thing that is really important for me is to make sure that the protege gets to take the lead. You as the mentor, it's not about you. It's about giving back to the protege. It allows them to figure out what goal it is that they want to accomplish. You also have to allow yourself the rapport. If you don't build a rapport as mentor protege, it's probably not going to work. And that mentor protege tends to get a little closer and a little closer. And most times you guys end up becoming very good friends. And it's just not a mentor protege. You have to focus on an end result. What is it that the protege wants? Where is it that they're wanting to go? And you need to give support and encouragement. I don't want anybody to feel like if they ask me to mentor them, that it's got to be my way. That's the old Carol. That's the school Carol. This is the Toastmaster Carol. She is cutting off some rough edges. She's developing and she's learning. So we have to make sure that we continue to help the protege to accomplish what it is they need to accomplish. Back to you, Heather.
Thank you, Carol. Our next panelist began his Toastmasters career in November 2016. Since then, he has completed 3 Distinguished Toastmasters Awards, as well as all 11 Pathways Paths, has served in every club officer role at least once, and has mentored 12 fellow Toastmasters along the way. He served District 33 as both the Division C Assistant Director, as well as the Division E Director. He served last year as District 50's Club Extension Chair and its Alignment Chair, and he will serve District 50 next year as the Pathways Chair. Professionally speaking, he leads an enterprise sales organization for McAfee. Please help me welcome Distinguished Toastmaster Dwayne Wanick.
Thank you, Heather. Good to see some of my old friends in the room today. It's been a pleasure being involved in Toastmasters. And as Heather said, I joined in November of 2016. And one of the first things my home club did was assign me a mentor. Didn't know what that meant, didn't know what to expect, but it was one of the best decisions that that club made at the time. That club had a formal mentor program, and it's one of the most pivotal parts of our success as individuals in this program. And the advice that I got, especially early on, ranged from strategic, such as you've just been voluntold to compete in the international contest. What does that mean? What is an international speech and where do I start? To tactical things such as, wow, they just gave me this CC manual. I've got to give 10 speeches. I'm not sure how to pick a topic. Dude, weren't you like, don't you have 3 XYs? I don't think topic selection is going to be your problem. So it's just been a great journey with every relationship that I've had. And I'm totally grateful that mentoring was part of that component from day one in my membership in Toastmasters. Heather?
Thank you, Dwayne. Our third panelist likes to think of himself as a jack of all trades, master of a few. He's established himself as a storyteller, a trainer, and a coach. For more than 20 years, he's been a speaker and facilitator, focusing on developing leadership and practical skills for nonprofit and educational organizations. During his 5 or so total years in Toastmasters, he's been a member of 9 different clubs. He helped to charter 4 of those clubs, including the one he started chartering before he even joined Toastmasters. In 2017 and 2018, he served as District 33's Pathways Guide, a role he continued long after its official conclusion. He is still working to support clubs and individual members in their transition to Pathways as the District 115 Pathways Ambassador. In addition to becoming a certified Pathways mentor, he has served several clubs in his favorite officer role as Vice President Education. As VPE, he has established or overseen mentoring programs with varying degrees of success and has learned from each of those experiences. And most importantly, He's had the opportunity to work with some of the best mentors in the Las Vegas Valley. Please help me welcome incoming District 115 Area B2 Director, Distinguished Toastmaster, Malik M.L. Williams.
Thank you, Heather. I really am glad to be here today because I really think mentoring in Toastmasters is one of the most critical components of helping not only individuals succeed, but to help clubs really succeed and stay strong. And I've had, as you mentioned, varying experiences. Coming into Toastmasters at first, I founded a club, a corporate club where I was working, and we were all new to Toastmasters. So we had no mentors whatsoever. So we spent a lot of time just trying to figure out what we were doing and how things were supposed to go. And then I joined a club that had mentors, but didn't have a formal mentoring program. And one of the mentors that was assigned to me was really just looking to get his check mark done for his DTM certification. And so I was told I had the mentor, and then 3 speeches later, he came to me and said, "Hey, how many speeches was that for you?" I said, 3. He said, "Oh, great. That means I'm done. Can you sign here?" And that was the extent of my mentoring experience with that person. And then I joined another club that had a really robust mentoring program, structured, very well prepared, with a lot of documentation and support for both the mentors and the proteges, and that made all the difference in the world. So my one tip to start off with is, if you don't have a mentoring program in your club, just have one. Just start with something. That is going to make a huge difference. You can grow it, you can change it, it will evolve over time, but start with something is my starting point. Heather?
Thank you, Malik. I'm so pleased that the 3 of you could join me for this discussion on club mentoring programs today. It's also very close to my heart, and I have similar stories to you, believing that it's critical for clubs. Mentoring is a fundamental aspect of the Toastmasters experience. Toastmasters International reports that club leaders around the world say that clubs and their individual members achieve more consistently when they have organized mentoring programs. But even with this knowledge, why do you think that there are so many clubs that don't have a mentoring program at all?
If I can, I'll jump in there. I think one of the challenges, having been in several clubs that don't have those programs or have really loose mentoring structures, I think one of the challenges with a lot of clubs is that they just don't know how to do it. They don't know that there are resources out there. They tend to see mentoring as an individual thing as opposed to a organized club structure thing. And I think that makes all the difference in the world, so that when everyone knows, if they're working towards certain designations, that mentoring another member is part of what you have to do as an individual. But the clubs don't realize how much stronger things can be if everyone in the club is engaged in mentoring in one way or another. So I think it's just really not knowing in a lot of cases.
Heather, I think that sometimes people, they do it really well for a while and it becomes second nature with that group. But if some of the key people move away or leave the club for whatever reason, it tends to deflate. And I believe that sometimes you just need a reminder. We have to get out there and say, do you have a mentoring club? Or do you have a mentoring program in your club?
Yeah, I think I agree with both of my fellow panelists, but I also think Ken's note in chat was spot on. You've got to bake it into the club culture. It's got to be important to at least the leaders of the club so that they can help disperse that as part of the culture in the club. But just like the benefits I saw almost immediately, it became important to me personally. So I tried to use that in my relationships with others, and it almost becomes contagious if it's built right.
Thank you for those thoughts. And those are in line with what a lot of people I've talked to have said. Not knowing how or not having that expectation. Many of our clubs are struggling with attracting and retaining members. Tell us how a strong mentoring program can benefit those clubs.
I'll jump in here. If we're going to attract members, we need to let them know that it is a safe environment, that there's going to be somebody there as a safety net to catch them or to help them, so that this public speaking leadership thing isn't so scary. If they don't allow themselves the opportunity to stretch with a little bit of safety around them, they may not be willing to try it at all. I know that there are a lot of people out there that they're not up for a challenge if they have to do it by themselves. You put one or two people next to them, they can accomplish the world.
Yeah, I agree. And I think fundamentally too, having that mentoring program in the club is what's going to help those members see growth, have, like Carol said, give them that safety net when they first come in, especially, and then help them actually move forward. The clubs that I'm in or have been in, and I won't be naming clubs for the most part today, but the clubs that don't have mentoring programs or not as formal structure with their programs, a lot of the members tend to feel somewhat lost. They come in, they join Toastmasters, and they're not quite sure what to expect, and there's no one there. They don't feel that structure to help them get the boost to get started and get moving in the direction of the goals that brought them to the club and the organization in the first place. So having a structured program in place is one of those things that's going to help people feel like they're moving forward and reaching their goals and feel like Toastmasters is something that benefits them.
Yeah, I totally agree. Mentoring normally falls within the realm of the responsibility of the VPE, but just like all of us, we all have strengths and weaknesses. And if you happen to be a member of the club and maybe that's not the towering strength of your particular VPE, and Pathways is a great example. There were a lot of VPEs that just didn't get it or wanted to get it. So it's okay to step up as an unofficial leader within your group and within your club to lead the charge. In the absence of leadership, it's okay to fill that vacuum. So you don't have to be designated as the mentor person, but if it's something that's important to you and you don't see it happening, take the charge. I promise you, we won't push back.
Thank you all. We have a few questions coming in over the chat that are very relevant, so I'm going to throw them in here. First, from Phyllis, do you feel that a mentor chairperson should be an officer as an official role within Toastmasters?
I'm going to say I think that is a great idea. It really does help to have someone officially recognized in the club who is focused specifically on developing and maintaining that program and managing those relationships. That said, there's not always, depending on the size of your club and the level of experience or engagement in your club, that may not always be feasible. Ultimately, that is the VPE's responsibility, but one of the ways the VPE can manage that without feeling like it's just one more thing they have to deal with, because let's be realistic, that is probably the biggest role in the club. But one of the ways they can manage that is by learning to delegate and having a mentoring chair who is taking that on specifically, and then just working with the mentoring chair to make sure that things are happening appropriately.
We also have another question from Dana that refers back to Carol's original comments. What is the most important order in putting mentor with protege? Rapport or availability to each other? What if the two members have a rapport but their schedules don't mesh?
If I may, I think that if they have a rapport, and the protege approaches the mentor and says, I really would like you to mentor me, even though our schedules don't match, they'll find a way to make their schedules match. And that way they can move on. The protege can learn, the mentor gets the experience of helping the protege. So rapport is a big one. If you don't have rapport, it's not gonna happen.
All right, thank you. In Toastmasters, we have both mentors and coaches. Mentors and coaches are often thought of as having similar roles, and the two positions can overlap, but they're actually very different. How do you explain the differences in these roles?
I'll jump in here first. They're very important, but for me, a mentor is a longer term relationship. It's something that could start at the beginning. It could start, later because maybe you weren't assigned one on day one like I was, but it's a relationship that lasts. There is no end date. My experience has been different than yours, Malik. They weren't looking for the 3, speech check off. They were in it for me to grow and learn, because as a mentor, your primary motion may be to advise and to teach, but you learn as much from your protege as you give. That's been my experience, at least. And so it's much more, it's a longer term thing. A coach, for me, has been more tactical. Maybe it's for a contest speech or for a particular thing that I wanted to work on. You get in, you get what you want, and you move on to the next thing that you're working on, where a mentor relationship should last a lot longer.
I agree with that 100%. I think the other thing that I sometimes hear clubs confusing is the club level roles and the individual level roles, so that there are club coaches and club mentors as well as individual coaches and mentors. And the club coach and mentor, that's a whole separate program for club development and retention. But I agree 100% with Dwayne about the roles of a coach versus a mentor when it comes to working one-on-one with somebody.
One of the things that I think of is kind of like a sports coach. A sports coach is going to tell you exactly what you have to do, and you're gonna listen to them. Whereas a mentor is more open and a little bit, I don't want to say a little bit more warm and fuzzy, but they're more interested in what you, the protege, has to do, whereas the coach oftentimes is more in it for themselves, is just where I see a difference. Now, that may not be true for many and all coaches, but that's kind of the way I view it.
Thank you, Carol. I'd like to go back to what Ken said at the beginning in the chat. He mentioned that we haven't made it an expected part of club culture. Every Toastmasters club has a purpose beyond the institutional purpose of making leaders. One club might be formed for employees of a company to hone their communication and leadership skills. Another might exist specifically to work on a single presentation skill, such as storytelling. Still another might exist to prepare members for speech contests. How can a club tailor their mentor program to fit the different needs or culture of the club?
That's an interesting question. And I think part of what you have to consider, going back to that whole notion of mentoring at the individual level, is that within that club culture, you still have people who are coming in who are trying to make progress toward their own specific goals. And mentoring really is a lot about first listening and figuring out what it is that person is trying to achieve, and then helping them move in that direction. Presumably, if someone joined a club, it's because that club culture fit for them, and that is a part of what they're working on. So if they're joining a club that's focused on storytelling, it's because they want to improve that. And so taking that into consideration as the mentor works with the protege is important. But fundamentally, I think the most important thing is to remember that the mentor is there for the benefit of that protege, that member, to help them make progress towards their individual goals.
That is a great point, Malik. And I'm going to shift from that right into my next question. A 2018 article in Toastmasters magazine said, "The success and quality of each Toastmasters club depends on its willingness for members to serve as mentors. There's an obvious reason why a new or less experienced member would want a mentee, but why should a more experienced member want to be a mentor? And what's your best advice to people who are going to mentor other members?"
That's a lot of information in that question, Heather. The first thing that I think of is, why do you want to become a mentor? One of the core values of Toastmasters is service. If you're not willing to serve, then you're not giving back to those that gave to you. We need to make sure that we pay it forward. We have received something, we need to allow somebody else to receive something. We have to push ourselves sometimes to get out there and feel that we're good enough to mentor somebody. There are a lot of people that may be afraid to mentor because they don't feel that they have the skills. When you put things in and test them a little bit, many times they do have the skills and they're ready to move forward. I can't remember the rest of the question, so I'm going to defer to my panelists.
I thought you did a really good job, Carol. You covered most of the pieces that I saw. I think sometimes when people push back, they're overwhelmed by the concept of what they think it is versus what it can be. There have been times when I've asked a particular individual, hey, will you mentor this new member? And they were so afraid because they hadn't done it before and it was just too overwhelming. So I kind of let it slide. And then a few weeks later said, hey, would you help this person with pathways? Because you're a few projects ahead of them. Oh yeah, I'd love to. So sometimes you have to break it down into a simpler form. The engagement can still be the same, but how it's sort of pitched may vary depending on the person that you're trying to recruit.
I think that's very important to remember too, is that people really don't feel like they're able or ready to do it. It may not be a matter of willingness. They may just be scared to step into an unfamiliar role. And that actually points up one of the best reasons to do it, I think, is that there is growth there and there's an opportunity for you to learn as a mentor as well. We tend to think of this mentoring relationship as it's all for the protege. And while its focus is on the protege's growth, it is not the only, the protege is not the only one who's going to grow from that relationship. One of the best ways I've seen to get people to feel a little more comfortable and a little more prepared is to actually prepare them. So one of the clubs that I'm in that has a stronger and more established mentoring program actually has a mentoring orientation. And I've seen mentoring orientation and training that helps people know, okay, we're not just throwing you to the wolves either. We're not putting you out there on your own. We'll go over the information with you, what's expected from the mentoring relationship, what you're expected to do, what you're expected to share. And here's a plan for how you can work with your protege. And those things are really, really critically helpful in getting more people engaged as mentors.
Thanks for that. I think those are great answers. On the flip side of that coin, the adoption of pathways provides new opportunities for mentorship. Many of the newer Toastmasters are thriving on the Pathways program, possibly because that's all they've experienced, while so many of our more seasoned Toastmasters are still reluctant to move forward in Pathways. Can mentoring help this situation? And if you believe so, how can clubs present more seasoned Toastmasters with the idea that they could use a mentor?
I'll jump in on that one since it's one of my favorite questions and favorite topics. I had the privilege of running both programs in parallel, so I get to compare my experience in the legacy and my experience in pathways. And I'll tell you, being completely candid, I was halfway through my second path when I realized, wow, why did I even continue in the legacy? Because pathways for me personally was much more aligned with what I do for a living, my involvement in Toastmasters and the leadership part of it, and then my nonprofit work outside of Toastmasters. I've done a lot of hands-on sessions, and what I find is, first off, at the end of this month, there's no more choice. So the choice has been removed. So the old-time, old-school, I'm never going to leave the manual's belief system is removed from the equation. And I've seen in the last 3-4 months an uptick in the kind of older school mentality reaching out going, hey, okay, this thing's inevitable. Apparently they're not going to extend the old program. We got to do it. It creates an opportunity. It creates an opportunity that the first time there's even a crack in the door that they could use help in any way, that's the moment that you have to seize. And at that point, you know who to point to them. And it doesn't have to be a formalized assignment, but just, the first step in mentorship could be just helping someone get over the fear of the unknown, which could lead to a longer term relationship outside the scope of what the first assignment might be.
I think that brings up a great point about the mentoring overall not being just about something that's targeted towards new members. And one of the areas of opportunity is for us to look at how we're mentoring those people who have been in Toastmasters for years and years and years, and now may need some help moving into pathways. In one of my clubs, I have a member who has earned her Distinguished Toastmaster designation under the Legacy program years and years and years ago, and she hadn't been objecting to pathways, but had been resistant to getting engaged in it herself, and recently has started being mentored by one of our gentler officers in the club who has helped her to start getting engaged. And she's like, oh, what was I waiting for? And so now, as she gets involved more, she'll be more ready to help other people as they come in the door to say, oh yeah, it's not as bad as you thought, or it's not as challenging as you might think it's going to be. Oh yeah, I thought it was going to be a big deal, but it's just this, that, and the other. So I think we need to step back and think about mentoring those people who have been around for a while and need help making that transition.
Along with what Malik says, I think it's really important that we continue to engage our already DTMs. We need them not only to step up as mentors, but we also need them to allow others to mentor them, because it's kind of a togetherness. It will work both ways. If we have DTMs or veteran seasoned Toastmasters that are refusing or reluctant to pathways, it's okay to set them up with some new fresh blood that's jazzed about pathways, to excite them, to light that fire and allow them to move forward in the pathways. There is a lot of wealth and knowledge in our district that this year I personally am hoping to tap into. I want to bring all of those people in. We need to unite this district and just blow it out of the water. We want everybody to learn. We want everybody to achieve what it is they came to Toastmasters for.
And just to add one more point, it really is an opportunity, and I'm kind of riffing off something Jesse put in the chat, but it's really an opportunity to learn. So for those members who have been around for a while and are kind of accustomed to just giving a speech every now and then, or maybe their experience has become sort of rote and routine, now is a great time for them to get some experience being assisted or learning something new from the people who maybe have jumped into pathways a little sooner. And like Carol said, it isn't really just about either you're a mentor or you're a protege. It's not one or the other. You can be mentoring someone and getting mentored yourself at the same time.
Thank you all. I'd like to shift gears a little bit and circle back to something that was touched on earlier, but delve a little deeper. A club mentoring program falls under the responsibility of the Vice President Education, a role which already has so many other responsibilities. It was mentioned that you could designate a person to take on master of that program, but for some of the smaller clubs that may or may not be possible. What advice can you give to VPEs on how to create and manage a strong mentoring program, especially if they're just starting out?
I think Malik said at the very beginning, what is the ideal program? Just having one. If you don't have one, start with something. It doesn't have to be overtly complicated and layered. Some of the VPs that I work with are, how do I want to put this, type A control freaks, and so they will over-engineer the solution to the answer, and that's okay too. If it fits, that shoe fits one of you in this room, it's not meant as a negative. But if you have nothing, start with something, and maybe it is as simple as assigning people to help folks acclimate to pathways, since it's new to older members and it's new to brand new members as well. But you can take whatever you've started with and build upon and learn from. And depending on the size and scope and culture of your club, you can't eat an elephant in one bite. So you have to chip away at it to get it from its current state to its future state.
The other thing is, how do we help those smaller clubs? There are other people in the district. It doesn't just have to come from inside your club. And the fact that we're meeting via Zoom opens our mentoring options up dramatically. We can pull people in from all over the world to come in and mentor. It doesn't have to be somebody who's in our own city. There are lots of people out there willing to mentor. There are lots of people out there that would love to be asked to mentor. Look outside your club if you need to.
I think that's an excellent point, Carol. And as an incoming area director, one of the things I've already thought about is how I can help the clubs in my area collaborate and utilize their resources as a group. And I know that there are some clubs in the area that are older and have a deeper base of experienced members, and some that are newer and have fewer members and mostly new Toastmasters in them. And sort of building a relationship there, you can even think, instead of you can have the individuals who are coming in to support your club as mentors. You can also think about building a relationship between one club and another club to have the older, more experienced club provide mentors on a regular basis for the newer club. And it benefits both clubs, really, because a lot of times those older, more experienced clubs have less turnover. They don't have as many new members coming in, and they may not get the opportunity, and it is an opportunity, they may not get the opportunity to mentor new members as much as they might like. And so working across clubs is an excellent, excellent way to get started.
Thank you. I'd like to start getting a little more personal and hearing about some of your specific experiences. Tell us about the most difficult experience with mentoring, whether as the mentor or the mentee, that you've had, and how did it turn out?
I'll I'll go back to something I mentioned at the top about that one mentor who just sort of wanted to check a box. As someone who was relatively new to Toastmasters, I didn't know what the mentoring program was about. I didn't know what to expect. And part of the problem I had was being told, oh, here's your mentor. This is the person who's assigned to you to help guide you, and have that person really not show up at all. I'm fortunate that I'm the kind of person who likes to dig around and try to find things out for myself. But that is not necessarily everybody. And if I had been the kind of person who really had been hanging on the fact that someone is going to help me here, and that person just never showed up, I would not still be around today. I would have been gone, because that's a broken promise. And that was, even for me, that was one of the biggest challenges. I can freely say I was, appropriate language, I was really ticked off when that person came to me and said, oh, you've done 3 speeches, great, I get credit. I was really tempted to say, I'm not signing that, you didn't do anything. So go try and do it next time, and then maybe you'll get your DTM. But at the time I was just like, yeah, okay, we're fine, whatever. So making sure that people who are committed to mentoring have the support they need to make sure that they're doing it and that they know what's expected of them, I think is critical, so that people don't have an experience like I had.
I just feel bad for your experience, Malik. I see it a little less as a broken promise and more of a misset expectation. You know, one of the things that I try to do when I sit down with someone for the first time is understand, what do they expect? So to answer your question, Heather, I think my most challenging experience was trying to have that conversation with a protege and said, okay, what do you want out of this program? And not being given an opportunity to connect on any level. You know, I don't know. Okay, well, why did you join Toastmasters? Well, my wife made me. Okay, why do you think she made you? I mean, you're having to drag out of them something, and you finally get some sliver of an idea of what they may connect with in this program, and you try to build upon that. But you know, normally people connect fairly easily because most of us have outgoing personalities. Even if we're introverts, we can be drug out of that very quickly. But it was a challenge. It took a good half hour to just find something to go, okay, let's drill down on that and build something around that.
When I think of a negative experience with mentoring, it's one of those where I was talking about a safety net. When you've got your safety net and suddenly that safety net gets yanked out from underneath you for a reason that you're completely shocked by, it makes it very difficult to get back up on your feet and figure out, how do I go about fixing this? So making sure that the safety net, the mentor, the mentee, that relationship doesn't get severed for some outside reason. The protege and the mentor need to have an agreement, expectations for one another that other people cannot come in and change. Don't let outside influences change those.
A common thread that I see in all 3 of your answers is the missed opportunity, the miscommunication. And it would be the VP of Education's responsibility to set up these mentor programs, the mentor-mentee relationship, or somebody that they've designated to do that. How does that person responsible for this program balance one person's need to check a box to complete their program and another person's need for guidance and a safety net, and get those 2 to really mesh to be helpful to both? How do we get the person who just wants to check a box to actually be a good mentor?
Sometimes you can't. When I was VPE and knew that about the personality of a particular person on the list of mentors and realized that was creating more problems than others, the way I fixed it wasn't trying to fix the person, because that's just who they were. I just quit assigning them to new people. and found the people that saw the benefit of being a mentor, and the fact that you get something out of it, that it's a give and take and it works both ways. And they basically rebuilt the list based on the level of engagement and attitude that people had for the program.
Dwayne, I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because it brought something else to mind, a situation when I was in a club where I was responsible for the mentoring program and had a challenging member who needed to do the mentoring in order, again, that it's not that this person was just trying to check a box, but they did need to get the mentoring done in order to move forward with their goals. And so it was kind of challenging because this person was not necessarily going to make the best mentor. One of the things that we did was to make a plan for that person. So basically get that person a mentor so that they could move forward and learn a little bit more about how to be an effective mentor before assigning them someone as a protege. And I think that goes back to something we all talked about in terms of setting expectations and really being clear. In order for me to feel comfortable assigning you someone, for you to be a mentor, first, you need to set these goals for you that you will then engage in. And I think that works the other way too, so that if you talk about setting expectations, people hear mentoring and they think, like Dwayne said earlier, it is a longer term thing. And certainly in most cases, in most effective cases, will develop into a more long-term relationship. But setting a shorter term goal for the formal part of that relationship, at least, can make it less daunting. And setting what the clear expectations are for the successful completion of the formal part of that relationship can help people be more engaged. So instead of saying, you need to mentor this person, and that person's thinking, okay, well, I've got to do it so I can get this check mark done, and I don't know what's going to happen after these 3 speeches, but I'll at least get these 3 speeches done. If you say, you need to mentor this person through their first 3 speeches, here are the expectations of what this will look like. And then beyond that, when you've worked with them for their first 3 speeches, we will then discuss what their relationship might look like going forward. We'll reevaluate, and maybe it's time for that person to move on to another mentor. Maybe it's time for that relationship, the formal relationship, to just dissolve at that point. But setting that expectation up front, I think, helps people to stay engaged when they can sort of see an end in sight and know exactly what the outcomes need to be.
Okay, thank you, Malik. I'd like to switch to the positive side for a minute. Toastmasters works when it's fun and friendly. So I'd like for each of you to talk about how fun and friendly can be applied to mentoring, or tell us your best mentoring experience.
When I think of my best mentoring experience, it was probably having all 4 of those mentors when I first came into Toastmasters. I was standing at a club meeting and Mike Wilson said, "We need a new president." And he looked around the room and he pointed to me. And I thought, wait a minute, I haven't been in Toastmasters long enough to be president. Look at all you guys. You guys have been in here for a long time. How do you expect me to do this? And knowing that I had all 4 of them, there's my safety net, helping me learn, I agreed to it. I don't know why I was crazy enough to agree to it, but I agreed to it. And it allowed me to grow. I really appreciate my mentors. I have multiple mentors. There are some people that I call up and ask questions about this, and then there are people that I call and ask about that, and I get to choose a little bit because I have people who are willing to help me out and fill that role as a mentor. I love it.
Carol, I'm glad to see that you're not the only one that was mentored into club leadership that way. I think my favorite experience actually ties back to one of the comments I believe Phyllis made in chat earlier in the conversation when I approached someone to actually coach me for a contest speech. And most of you know John Kendi, and he just happened to be one of the funniest guys in one of my clubs. And I knew if anyone could help me punch it up, it would be John. And the experience in coaching for that one particular speech led to a mentor relationship. And I'm not even so sure that that was my idea. It just sort of happened. You know, you look back 6 months later and realize, wow, this guy's been there for every step of the way. He used to call from time to time just to see what new speech I was working on and, you know, where I was in my head on a particular topic. And I didn't realize until, you know, unfortunately, his passing, how much of an influence he had on so many aspects of my life. So I'm just forever grateful that I met the man and that he chose to engage me the way that he did.
I think that's awesome. It's amazing how much a mentoring relationship that's really positive can grow beyond its original purpose. One of my favorite mentoring relationships or experiences is from the flip side, where I was mentoring someone, and because I was able to work with him to get him to really open up and become vulnerable and really look at his experiences and bringing his whole self to his presentations, we developed a much deeper relationship, and we are good friends now. And that's someone who I would not have had as the kind of friend that I have now if it hadn't been for that mentoring relationship. And I think that speaks to the fun and friendly part, which is that these mentoring relationships, for the most part, happen outside of the club meeting environment. And so it's a great way, in addition to just the development of skills, it's a great way for people to get to know each other and make connections with each other outside of the club meeting. You kind of get to see one perspective of people inside that meeting. But then as you develop relationships and as you work with different mentors or as you work with different proteges, you start to build connections and start to build those networks and build those friendships. And so that really does feed into the fun and friendly part of what Toastmasters is all about.
Thank you. We are almost out of time, and there are a few key things to wrap up. I'd like to provide each of our panelists the opportunity to highlight what you believe to be the key elements of today's discussion, and also provide one takeaway that you hope people will remember. If you'll please restrict your response to 90 seconds or less.
90 seconds is all I get? Uh-oh, I'm going to take their 90 seconds. No. Key thing, don't be afraid to mentor. Step up and do it. People will grow no matter what skills you learn from this. Those are my takeaways.
All right, thanks, Carol.
Wow, that wasn't even close to 90 seconds. Let's see if I can top that. I think the big takeaway is really twofold. I'm going to steal Malik's from earlier. If you don't have a program, start one. And it can be small, it can be tactical, it can be focused on one thing, but then build upon that. But just the advice to anyone who's worried or nervous about being a first-time mentor, just say yes, just do it. You know, make it part of your commitment to being of service, because what you'll get from it is so much greater than anything you'll ever give.
And since Dwayne stole mine, I'll just add, no club is an island. I think that is critical for clubs that are thinking about, I don't know how to get started. In addition to just starting a program, remember that even as a club, you don't have to do it by yourself. There are resources, there are connections. As a club, you're part of an area, a division, a district, an international organization that has all kinds of resources to help you and support you. So you're not alone.
Thank you all. I'm grateful that we're able to have such an amazing group of panelists discuss club mentoring programs, which is a topic that I feel very strongly about. We've heard the panelists discuss some best practices for your program. They provided tips for building a quality program to increase your member retention and drive engagement, and also tips to just get going. So I hope everyone has found value in the conversation today. I'd like to say thank you, Carol, thank you, Dwayne, and thank you, Malik, for sharing your expertise with us. I'd also like to give a big thank you to Michael Morrow for being our Sergeant at Arms and Zoom Master running the show today. And I know Michael has something to say. Would you like to say something now, Michael?
Yes, as a former Vice President of Education, and what I've been through as a member starting out in the beginning, it's good to have a mentorship program, but I think it's more important to not announce that you're making somebody a mentor or a protege, because I've been on both sides, and when you assign somebody, they become resistant. That's the biggest problem, not just having or being, you have people who feel that they're being forced into something. So instead of doing that, you may want to send the protege over to the mentor, and this happened to me without even being planned, and have that person say, could you help me? It's a big difference in how that person will respond and become a mentor. Same thing with a mentor getting a protege. If you assign it to a mentor, they feel like you've hit them with something. But if you tell a mentor to go and get to know this person, then they develop a friendship and he becomes a mentor without even knowing it. So I think that that should be taken into consideration, because that works. The other ones that I've experienced, it meets resistance. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Is there anyone else who'd like to say anything? I can give 30 seconds to anyone who'd like to speak up. Okay. Well, thank you all for attending this session and for your questions. You've all been a great audience, and I really appreciate you showing up for me and for our panel. Thank you all.
Take care, happy people.
Bye, Jesse.
Thank
That's
you.
great. Have a good one.
Thank you all.
Great job, Heather. Kudos.
Thanks, Malik.
One step closer to DTM.
Yes, I just have my last thing on Wednesday night, and then I'll be done.
Excellent. What are you doing Wednesday?
Wednesday, I'm doing facilitating discussion project 4, the challenging situations. So I'll be doing that with Benchmark.